Obsession. A true story. The unfolding of a very complex process of obsession, with its main roots planted deep in the mysterious soil of past incarnations, with many implications projected into the future of those involved.
Hello friends! We are here once again to discuss another thought-provoking, eye-opening and heart-opening chapter from the book Obsession, psychographed by Divaldo Franco and the spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. The chapter we will discuss today is entitled Reproach and Elucidation. It is chapter 7, and this chapter can be a point of reference for our lives as Christian spiritists, those of us who are making daily efforts to follow the steps of the Christ. Why? Because we clearly see in that chapter the realities of which we are part today. Why do I say that? Because we see those who resist surrendering to divine love in spite of their divine nature. We see the spiritual companions who attune with that movement of resistance. And on the other hand, we see those who are truly making constant efforts to engage with the Christ consciousness and with the practice of charity without boundaries, without expectations. In other words, we see in Rosangela an example of a person who truly gives without expecting to receive. And in her dialogue in the chapter today, we will all learn how she approaches the most challenging situations in a very noble and Christian way. So let us pray at this moment to hope that Rosangela will indeed serve as a model for all of us. Let us take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, giving thanks to God for the gift of the physical body that allows each and every one of us to be incarnated on this beautiful earth. And let us render graces for Allan Kardec, our Master Jesus, and each and every one of the messengers of love who have walked the pathway of inner transformation before us. Let us render infinite graces to them and pray to God, hoping that we are courageous, that we are honest, that we are strong to follow their examples, step by step, one day at a time. So let us affirm to ourselves, I am willing to allow the character Rosangela to be a model of Christian conduct for myself. I am willing to allow the character Rosangela to be a model of Christian conduct for myself. One more time. I am willing to allow the character Rosangela to become a model of Christian conduct for myself. I am willing to align myself with the Christ consciousness. And now, surrounded by vibrations of Jesus' love and His very presence, we begin our study of tonight. So be it.
Chapter 7. Reproach and Elucidation. From the Spirits Book, Part 2, Chapter 9. Question number 459. Do spirits influence our thoughts and our actions? Answer. Their influence upon them is greater than you suppose, for it is very often they who direct both. Question number 465. To what end do imperfect spirits incite us to evil? Answer. To make you suffer as they themselves do. The hospital's director was very annoyed after his interview with Colonel Santamaria. As soon as the colonel had left, he sent for Rosangela. The girl answered the summons with the hidden knowledge that a critical moment had come for her to prove her faith. As she walked into the office, the doctor looked hard into her face, and without asking her to sit down, said straightforwardly, "Colonel Santamaria has just left my office. He had some very serious complaints about your behavior." The girl turned pale, but kept her composure. The doctor rose from his chair, stared coldly into her calm eyes, and flashed sharply, "How dare you turn this hospital into a place for disgusting practices of black magic?" "I beg your pardon, sir," replied the girl, a little startled. "There must be some mistake." "Don't interrupt me," shouted the doctor angrily. "Remember what you are and keep your place. Incidentally, you are still under a trial period. Your fault is serious enough for us to have you fired without further consideration." "Would you please tell me what happened?" asked the assistant nurse. "You are said to practice black magic on one of our patients, Colonel Santamaria's daughter to be exact. What can you say to this?" "I can only say that the information is false, and therefore the charge is not justified." She was under the protection of her spirit guide, who would inspire her to say the right words. "Are you trying to say that Colonel Santamaria is lying? Are you out of your mind?" "Certainly not, sir. I don't mean that. I do affirm, though, that I've never engaged myself in any activity that would run against my dignity, let alone black magic, which I know absolutely nothing about." "But you're involved with spiritism, and you are a member of one of those silly groups of lunatics, aren't you?" "I'm afraid you're mistaken, sir. I am a spiritist, yes, and I'm very proud of it. Spiritism is allowed by the laws of this country and is recognized as a wonderful philosophy of life and a consoling religion. As to the allegation that spiritists are a silly group of lunatics, I'd like to take the liberty to ask you, as director of this hospital, what is the religion professed by the patients of this house? As far as I know, Esther never attended a spiritist center, which was a pity, I believe, because had she done so, she would perhaps have been spared the ordeal she is going through now." "You are not only insane, but also insolent," the doctor replied. "I'm very sorry, doctor, but I trust my faith, and my conduct here, I think, has been irreproachable. If my cooperation with this hospital is no longer required, there's no reason to build a problem on it," she said boldly. "But I cannot just keep silent after such an unfair accusation. I trust God, and I know you're a sensible man who always appeals to reason." There was nobility and courage in the girl's words. Surprised by her dignified attitude, the doctor sat down again, and his anger seemed to abate. Dr. Nilton Silva, the hospital's director, was a judicious person. A man very dedicated to his job, he would not have the hospital used as a mere commercial establishment. On the contrary, he was always ready to help a patient and willing to provide a vacancy in an emergency. He was usually good-humored and had a smile for everyone. Because of this, everybody appreciated him. Nevertheless, that morning had been particularly difficult for him. He had had quite an argument with his wife, which had annoyed him greatly. In addition, his first case at the hospital had been the angry complaint of Colonel Santamaria. All that weighed heavily on his temper, causing his rudeness. He was not a religious man, and prided himself on that. But he was a courteous, real gentleman. His emotional turmoil that morning had been carefully arranged by a vengeful, discarnate spirits who wanted to create all sorts of difficulties for the Santamarias, using Esther as their scapegoat. It had not been the first time that he had had to stand a negative siege from the invisible world, mostly because of his important position. Some of his colleagues sometimes suffered similar pressures. After a pause, he looked again at the young girl standing before his desk. He considered how much she depended on that job. She was liked by everybody at the hospital, although she had been working there only for a short time. Her firm and noble attitude during the dialogue had also impressed him. As if trying some sort of excuse for his rude manners, he said, "The Colonel forbids you to approach his daughter." And after a short pause, "Will you please give me your side of the story?" "I shall be brief," she began. "I sympathized with the girl Esther at first sight. I put a lot of love in my work because I do believe that love can succeed where other means fail. Well, after watching Esther for some time, knowing something about obsession because I'm familiar with the Spiritist doctrine, I decided with my friend Dr. Albuquerque's permission to discuss Esther's position with her family. For this purpose, I visited them in their home and gave them my unpretentious yet honest opinion about their daughter's psychic problem. Unfortunately, her father didn't have enough patience to listen to me. Consequently, I could not recommend, as I had intended, a spiritual treatment parallel with the medical care she's getting here." "And what?" interrupted the doctor with a sneer. "And what would such treatment be?" "Both the colonel and his wife should attend a spiritist group or center, helping the girl with their prayers, and later on, the group would start a regular disobsession treatment." "And do you really believe in prayers and in this disobsessing treatment you talk about?" he growled with a large, contemptuous smile. "Certainly," continued the nurse imperturbably. "Not only do I believe, but I have also had the chance to witness some surprising results." "With some suggestible or mystical neurotics, probably," suggested the doctor. "Not only with those," she added, undisturbed, "but also with others who had undergone long, useless treatments just because their disease was not located in the mind but in the spirit, or in some other cases was due to the interference of alien spirits. I've seen many incurable patients recover from depression and schizophrenia. We spiritists consider this quite natural, because in fact such patients were, for karmic reasons, obsessed by ignorant earthbound entities." "My dear young lady, remember that I am both a psychiatrist and a positive atheist," the doctor snapped conclusively. "What you might say might be a beautiful illusion, but it is absolutely irrational. How can you prove it?" "Easily enough. Just by attending a reliable spiritist center." "Why, are there unreliable ones?" "Certainly. Just as you have bad doctors, incompetent or reckless ones, we come across bad servants everywhere. That is why we find successful and adequate organizations here and there. Man casts the shadows of his moral development about him, purifying or polluting his surroundings according to his spiritual development. What about me? I don't believe in God, and I consider all these sick people who come to us as dangerous psychopaths." "Your incredulity only affects yourself," affirmed the girl. "It does not change the reality of God. As to the second affirmation, if I'm not mistaken, not long ago doctors from two different schools, the physiologists and the psychologists, fought each other for supremacy. Pasteur, Broca, Hewlings-Jackson, and many others, including the well-known Dr. Pinnell, were regarded as plain madmen. Scholars and scientists from all times have had to cope with the same label, for it is much easier to criticize what we do not understand than to study it, to harass the good workers than perform their tasks, to hamper the idealists than to overcome our selfishness, set to work, and try to surpass them." After a short pause, she continued, "Well, Dr. Silva, if you'll excuse me, you're not properly informed about such matters, I'm afraid. The chaotic opinions that have reached you are distorted ones. They come out of prejudice and ill will. I have Dr. Gavon's permission to invite you to our home meetings so that you can see for yourself and judge accordingly." "Thank you," said the doctor, "but I'm quite comfortable in the way I consider life and its hard facts. Let's close this interview that is getting too long anyway. Please keep your opinions to yourself from now on, and don't get too close to the girl, Esther. Do I sound sensible enough? Yes, sir. May I leave now? Certainly. As Rosangela walked out of the room, the doctor, surprised by what he had heard, sank in deep meditation. After all, he thought, there was some logic in what that girl said. One could sense a good cultural background. Evidently, the forces of good had won their first battle, and the river of divine mercy channeled its course towards Esther. Well, what a powerful chapter, and it helps us to understand something that we call in our modern lives mental illness. For here we understand that what Esther is experiencing has deep spiritual origins, that whatever is in our physical body, whatever's manifesting in our physical body, whatever becomes up into our conscious level, is first filtered through the perispirit. And only Spiritism helps us to understand how our being vibrates with these many dimensions of influences and energies coming from different parts of our spiritual body, coming from our body itself, coming from all parts of this multidimensional spiritual self that we have. And we need to be aware that the impact that spiritual obsession can have on our own mental state. So this is important because Rosangela knows that it's this knowledge, which is not known by everyone, but this knowledge is going to be what's necessary to help Esther. And so despite the fact that she may lose her job, despite the fact that she may have some discomfort in doing so, she directly informs the director of the clinic where she works of the specific spiritual treatment that she is planning to conduct. And not only does she tell, of course, as we know, the director, but in the previous chapter she told the Santa Marias what she recommended they do. And so here we see that this is not an easy task Rosangela has in front of her. And most, or many, if not most, people in her circumstance may not have done what she did. She was very brave. We can get the sense here that the mentors are encouraging her. But remember, Rosangela has free will, just like all of us, to choose to take the easy road out and to say, well, even though I know that's the thing to do, to recommend Santa Maria's go to a spiritist center to receive disobsession treatment for themselves and Esther, and I know this is the right thing to do. The fact of the matter is that, well, in this modern age of medicine, and that's not accepted, and the insurance doesn't pay for it. You can just imagine the kinds of things that it's not going to be accepted by my director. What are the people who are in my clinic going to say? What the Santa Maria is going to say, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That voice is certainly inside of her, but we get this sense that she's so directed and so focused on this that it inevitably has to be the case that she's not speaking for herself alone. She is speaking through the voice of the spirit mentors who are guiding her in this effort to inform her director of her side of the story. Not only to inform the director of her side of the story, but also you can see here the sense that the mentors are directing her to calmly respond to the criticisms that she's receiving from the Santa Marias. And in doing so, and doing both an impressive job in explaining herself, and also in doing an excellent job in keeping from reacting in a negative way, she greatly impresses the director with her composure and knowledge of the psychological health of Esther. And so here we see really the fact that in taking these good actions, Rosangela is really fulfilling the will of God. By fulfilling the will of God, she's able to receive the help and to be supported by the good spirits, standing for the good, supported by the good. Another important lesson we can learn from this chapter is that in doing good, we should be expected to face resistance. In fact, we're all tested this way all the time. Anytime we choose to do good works, there are those who are going to test our faith. The spirits who are suffering, as it says in the opening quote of this chapter from the Spirits book, in question 465, to what end do imperfect spirits incite us to do evil? And the answer is, to make you suffer as they themselves do. These spirits that are around us who are suffering want us to suffer as they do, if only because they themselves know nothing other than suffering. We can't blame them for that. They're experiencing the reality of suffering. But in doing the good works, we should expect to be tested by those spirits who may, for their life is focused in or surrounded by suffering. They're going to challenge us in our efforts because they ultimately do not have the knowledge that we do, or they do not have the awareness of the higher realms. They may be suffering so much that they're blocked from understanding the beautiful, loving nature of God. So, in doing these actions, Rosangela is really fighting a battle, or dealing with a battle between good and evil. There is no neutral position. And Rosangela is deciding to take the good road, fulfilling the will of God, and not being tempted by all the supposed pleasures of not acting and not doing the good, which would be a quote-unquote comfortable life, a promotion, an easy time with the director. No, she decides to go through and face the director and the Santa Marias, do the good, and we can see the consequences here. The consequences here in this case are that the good spirits help to direct the situation, allowing Rosangela, it seems right now, to keep her job, although to be blocked from working with Esther. And we also see the director seemingly finding a new sense of Rosangela, a new feeling of respect perhaps for her, even though she may disagree with her, which is an interesting outcome, and an outcome which we could describe as being something which has come from divine intervention. And so let us now think about that in our own daily lives, how we might be able to do good more, how we might be able to find opportunities to do the good, even when it seems that doing the good may be impossible or at least inconvenient, remembering that we are ultimately under the protection of the good in doing the good, and that we ultimately also will face challenges in doing the good, but that we ultimately have a choice all the time in every incarnation of whether or not we're going to do the work of the good or the work of the evil. So let's now reflect upon that in our daily lives, and in doing that, we will be able to apply the Rosangela's experience to our own lives and really personalize this book for our own benefit and for the benefit of all those who benefit from our own actions.
And let us also remember that evil in this case is not someone or a spirit that is eternally condemned, but rather it is the lack of knowledge, understanding, or lack of emotional awareness or of their own spiritual state. So those who society label as evil are not evil by nature. They are just ignorant of the true universal laws that govern all of us. So by conducting herself in this Christian way, Rosangela is an example not only for us, the incarnate spirits, but also for the discarnate spirits who are suffering because they have no point of reference. So a question that we can meditate upon as well is the following: who is our point of reference? Are we willing to give the Christ space in our hearts, minds, and spirits to have Him be our true point of reference? That's a question that, of course, no one needs to answer directly to us, but answer to yourself in your own meditations and conversations with our Father, Mother, God. So now we would like to ask Mark to lead us in a moment of reflection through a beautiful closing prayer.
Thank you, dear mentors, for the gift of this book, which helps us to understand the impact of spiritual obsession on our mental vibrations, on our relations with others, and also helps us to understand how we can become better servants of God. Dear God, help us to become more loving. Help us to become more committed to service. Help us to become ever more so guided by the divine light, which is leading us towards actions which will help us to do the good under the protection of the good spirits. We trust in the good spirits. We trust in their actions. We trust in their efforts. Thank you, good spirits, for always being behind us, for guiding us, for giving us the direction in our lives through intuition, through suggestions, and so forth. And thank you, good spirits, for your continued guidance in our lives, to guide us to help others who are suffering and in need, both in the incarnate and discarnate planes. And so be it.
So be it. And until we meet again, we wish you many blessings of gratitude and fraternal love.